Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Hayward City Council. It is April 2nd, 2024 at 7:03 p.m. Call this meeting to order. I'd like to invite Council Member Ray Bonilla, if you can do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, if you can please take the roll.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Bonilla Jr.
Present.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Present.
Councilmember Roach.
Here.
Councilmember Sire.
Present.
Councilmember Cermeño.
Presente.
Mayor Salinas.
Present. Thank you. Next is our closed session announcement. We did have a closed session. Our city attorney would typically make the closed session announcement. Today he will not because I'm going to make it. Today we started the process to evaluate the city attorney, and he gave his first presentation, which is the first step of his evaluation. And council took no reportable action. Next, I'd like to go to public comment. Public comments. The public comment section provides an opportunity to address the city council on items not listed on the agenda or informational staff presentation items. The council welcomes comments and requests that speakers present their remarks in a respectful manner within the established time limits and focus on issues which directly affect the city or are within the jurisdiction of the city. As the council is prohibited by state law from discussing items not listed on the agenda, items will be taken under consideration and may be referred to staff. The City Council welcomes comments, including criticisms about policies, procedures, programs, or services of the city or of the acts or omissions of the City Council. Speakers shall not use threatening, profane, or abusive language which disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of a City Council. The city is committed to maintaining a workplace free of unlawful harassment and is mindful that city staff regularly attend city council meetings. Discriminatory statements or conduct that is hostile, intimidating, oppressive, or abusive are per se disruptive to a meeting and will not be tolerated. With that, I will go first to my card. And well, actually, let me check some. I don't see a public comment online, so I'm going to go to my card. Is Beatrice? Is it Morel? Morellis. I apologize.
No problem. Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Beatrice Morales. I'm a representative from Carpenters Local 713. I'm speaking on behalf of 36,000 carpenter men and women across Northern California. Tonight I'm here to voice our values as a membership and to make sure responsible contractors will be used on our projects in this county, that they honor area standards and are giving our brothers and sisters the proper prevailing wage they deserve. Carpenters deserve to earn a fair wage with medical and retirement benefits that allow workers and their families a chance to thrive and prosper, to have local opportunities, to avoid huge commutes, to provide for said families, and to maintain the freedom to reinvest back into the economic community as they spend their earnings, with their tax dollars helping fund schools and governments. A few more of our values come with a commitment to apprenticeship programs to guarantee that we will continue to have trained, skilled, and experienced workforce that is able to compete with high-quality projects in a safe and timely manner. This provides opportunities for a career path for many men and women who have or will go through our apprenticeship program. It also ensures that the future generations of carpenters continue our legacy as the master craft. Being a member of this union gave me and others access to amazing opportunities. Carpenter members look forward to move to more than their income. They are excited to have a chance to revitalize their own community. And we as a community strive to elevate and protect an honest and just livable for all of our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to return to online, and I see a name here. I think it's Shubi Aishida. Oh, so if this is for the CSC part of the meeting, I will. Do we know that for sure? Yes. Is she a commissioner? Oh, okay. Oh, she's an applicant. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I will close public comment, and what I'd like to do is.
Mayor Salinas, my apologies. I believe you have 3 other cards for
Oh,
public
were
comment.
those the? I thought they were. I thought these are consent item, or just general public comments. Okay. Okay, I'll just go to the public comments. Let me just do this. Okay, first is Paul Taylor.
Mayor Salinas, esteemed city council.
If you can pull the mic down, and, yeah, there you go.
Mayor Salinas, esteemed city council, thank you for convening this. Most of you know me. I'm Paul Taylor. I am the executive director at the Rental Housing Association and a board member at the Hayward Chamber of Commerce. I think there's been like some mischaracterization of kind of what we do at RHA, but we provide information to our members, advice and education. We've got 602 members that are doing business. 90 of them are conducting business here in Hayward. So one of the things that they'd asked us to do, because we're normally doing the county and the assembly, and they're saying, can you guys start doing the municipalities? And my first thing is, yeah, we don't have all this time, but I'll do this. So we're a chamber member of Hayward, also a chamber member of Fremont, and also with San Leandro. So for me, it's like, okay, so we're going to get involved locally, but I'm asking my members, have you guys had the opportunity to go to a city council meeting? And I'm not going to shock you. They're like, no, we don't do city council meetings. I said, then you really aren't invested in city government, and that needs to happen. You know, we'll break it down to the cities, but what we really want to do is to have our members become, especially the 90 that are doing business here, involved with this. So one of the things that, this is where the misconception comes in. Yeah, we do represent housing providers, but also we work with Echo Housing. I've gotten calls from Echo Housing when they've had an issue because a housing provider literally is not following the law. And they're kind of obstinate when they're talking to Echo Housing. They've called us, and we're able to call that housing provider back and say, yeah, you can't do that. And what we found out is that a call from us or a call from a constituent of ours, Ebra, we get big-time results. They're successful because they understand, well, you guys are with us. Yeah, but you're breaking the law. You can't do that. And the one thing that kind of came up was $75 is the max rent before it triggers other such, I guess you could say, meetings. So our member wanted to go ahead and raise it 100 and had told us, yeah, we raised it 75, but we haven't been able to raise rents for a while. Real short, it just took a conversation and said, $25 a month? You're going to go through all these headaches? Raise it 75. Raise it to what you can. But I need to say this. It's important. So not every tenant is a bad tenant. In fact, just the opposite. Not every housing provider is a bad housing provider.
Mr. Taylor, your time is up.
Oh, I didn't see it. I thought
Yeah.
it was over there.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So-
No worries. Thank you very much. if you guys want to reach out to us, we're here. And thank you for the 3 minutes instead of the 2 that they
you.
give every place else.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next speaker is it Public A? Public A?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here as a general citizen, a tenant, and
No, just pull the mic down. There you go. There you go.
I hope my time hasn't started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here as a tenant and a citizen of Hayward, resident of Hayward. I'm here to speak truth to power and to those who would listen. We're pleading SOS, help, as seniors, elderly, single females, minorities, disabled, including now dealing with health medical crisis such as cancer, immune, respiratory, breathing, seizures, and other concerns. Today, continually, repeatedly since the year 2019, it being brought to your attention, the city of Hayward, with the landlord-reliant property management at Leisure Terrace Apartments has been violating, abusing the tenants, especially Black minorities. Insisting that tenants pay their rent and don't have possession of a place, including to live, habitable or otherwise, in and under on any during circumstances. Both the city and the landlord demanding tenants to sign paperwork the landlord has provided with not having tenants correct social security, correct birthday, correct unit, correct names, correct rent amounts, correct dates, correct anything. And this you're authorizing them to evict us for. Refusing to uphold, the city's been refusing to enact and uphold its own tenant protections, rent control, housing statutes, ordinances, requirements, contingencies, etc. on behalf of a tenant. Yet, it passed emergency law, regulations, and everything else for Leisure Terrace Apartments with the Reliant Property Management of Reliant Group to have special circumstances and favors and everything else for them to do what they do. But you can't pass anything special and enact it and enforce it to protect tenants. That's a bit to swallow. Refusing to provide public tenants proof of public records, such as copies of city council meeting videotapes they testified in, that are now conveniently disappeared from the city's website, with being specified as never happening, never recorded, meeting canceled, when they did actually occurred. And people such as myself and other tenants from Leisure Terrace did testify at. We can't have those for our records to prove our own points. The city has decided that that's not to our benefit, the tenants. Including for said properties, code and violations, reports, contracts, information. We can't have it to protect ourselves, neither from you, the landlord, any of the other agencies involved, including the city. Doing property units and property inspections and passing them as okay when they're absolutely not. Providing funding to agencies such as Central, Legal de Laza, Bay Area Legal, and others in kind, which more than 90% of the time, before COVID and after COVID, they are not representing any of these tenants in any format, besides possibly to do an intake, which does not help a tenant in a legal civil case eviction system.
Madam Speaker, your time is up, but you did not include your phone number on the card. If you give our city clerk your phone number, I can have somebody from our housing division to call you and follow up, okay?
Yes, sir. If you'll notice there's a public speaker B, I'm going to speak on that person's behalf.
I will allow you to do a public speaker B, so you can have 3 more minutes. But then after that, then I can certainly have staff call you. So you may proceed. Start with the 3 minutes again, please.
Like I said, you're providing these agencies funding and to represent the tenants, which they're not. because they're protecting your interests, the landlord's interests, and any other parties with more power, with more money that is involved. This has been happening for years, before COVID and after COVID. Refusing tenants a general right to be homeowners. Instead of funding those programs, you're funding programs for landlords, rich multi-billionaire landlords, like you did with Reliant Property Management, where they are on an annual basis getting 5% or more in rent increases, when if you funded mortgages, there would be no annual increase for the homelessness crisis to be the way it is. As has been done in our cases, like I said, the landlord, these are the things the landlord has been doing, which the city and its representatives has been telling us that we have to sign these documents, which we be committing to say that we're aware of these things when we're not, just under the threat, so we don't lose our homes and our housing, just to have a roof over our head, which in turn they still turn around and evict us for, because we signed documents with fraudulent or false information, whether under protest or duress. This is unconscionable, extremely unconscionable. This is maniacal, it's sadistic, it's sociopathic, it's narcissistic, based on people who have money, who have an exercise of power, all being done against poor tenants, the general public such as ourselves. It's got to stop. Not many of you came from wealth. A lot of you came from poverty. A lot of your households as children received some of these benefits and needed them. Didn't make you a bad person. Didn't make you less than anybody else. You needed help. There's no reason why you're in the position you are now to turn around and do to you what was done to others. You're doing to others what was done to you, basically. Even if it wasn't done to you and you grew up wealthy, have a conscience. Be a human being, a decent human being. Do something like you do for the rich, where you pass laws, you set them aside and you exempt them to give them what they want. These laws were established to protect the poor in general from the mighty, the wealthy, and those in power. There's a balance that's needed that's long been gone. Welfare to the rich needs to stop. They already have lands, properties, and enough money to build for themselves what they want without the taxpayers paying for it, or poor tenants.
Ma'am, thank you. And like I said, okay. Our next speaker, our speaker online I just wanted to check to make sure she wanted to talk, if she wanted to speak in public comment. So, Shubi, Aishida, if you key up, you can go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Shubi Aishida. I'm the executive director for the Peace Haven. It's a nonprofit here in Hayward. We started back in during the pandemic. And basically, just going straight to the point, we opened the Freedom Store just before the holidays. And for the first time, we applied for a grant from the city for this Freedom Store. And I just want to comment on part of the interview. During the interview, we had commissioners that were really, really rude to us and quite condescending in their manner. And they made us feel like we were sitting on hot seats of beggars. And what we're doing is for the community, is not for ourselves. And the reason for the Freedom Store is to change the face of giving in Hayward. And this has been single-handedly built out and constructed without any funding from the city. And for the first time we're applying for grant, we were told to go find other funders during the interview. And also, they didn't put into consideration the equity, saying, why are we in downtown Hayward? Because there was going to be gentrification in Hayward, and they don't want a Freedom Store in Hayward. And I explained to the lady that we help the homeless as well as low to moderate income family. The economy is hard enough, And we have to do something that gives some form of racial equity and dignity to individuals based on their circumstances. And also, from the recommendation, they offered to give us just $10,000, which is like, doesn't even pay for gas bill. Talk less of employing. We're looking to create employment as well. This does not even pay this. If you're going to pay staff for that, that's paying way below minimum wage at about $5 an hour for a part-time staff. So the reason why I'm coming here is I feel like this needs to be looked into, the way the commissioners treated ourselves, and also the recommendation I feel is not fair. We've never applied for any grant, and we need the support of our city to make this happen. And we're being pushed out. Like you don't deserve to be here. You don't deserve to be downtown. What do your neighbors think about it? Those were part of the questions being asked us, and I felt that was really condescending and very demeaning. That's the word. It was quite demeaning, and I just feel I should make this comment, and also like to appeal to yourselves, like you should look into this what's it called now? To look into the recommendations and also review what we're being offered as grant, and to know that we need more than what we're being offered. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker in the chamber is Sandra Archuleta.
No? Oh, there you go. So I had initially come in because the last time I was here, there wasn't a Zoom option, which I thought was not great. And so I had initially come in to say, hey, these meetings really should be on Zoom. People should be able to come and give public comment on Zoom. But then I realized that you guys do have it on Zoom, and so I just want to say how important it is to have that level of access for people that have disabilities, that might have jobs, kids. Like, it is such a huge barrier to have to come in person. And so I don't know if there was a reason, maybe because it was an HLAC meeting, that it wasn't on Zoom last time, but I just really want to advocate for these types of meetings, always having a Zoom option. I also think that there should always be interpretation at these meetings, because that's also important, and just reducing the barrier of access, because given how important the things on the agenda are on any given meeting, the low number of speakers and people that participate is incredibly impactful, and anything that we can do to increase people being able to have access and speak their minds is just so important. So I'm glad that there is Zoom, that you guys did have it this time, and I hope that you continue to expand that tool that we have. That is just such a great opportunity for people to engage in different ways. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards. There's no one else online. So I'd like to close public comments. And I'd like to make one small edit to the agenda. On my agenda, the next item is city manager's comments, but on the published agenda, city manager comments come further down. So I'm going to move up city manager's comments because I do not want to sit through a whole meeting and not hear the city manager's comments. Anyways, Madam City Manager.
Well, I appreciate it. Actually, it's probably more important that members of the public hear the city manager comments, because they're usually announcements about events, and I don't think folks want to sit through the whole meeting just to hear some of them. So thank you for moving that up, and apologies for the mix-up on the agenda. We're not exactly sure what happened on the published agenda. Anyway, the first item I have this evening is from the Hayward Police Department. Wanted to announce they are holding a recruiting event this Saturday, April 6th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It is being highlighted as called Athlete to Officer. And it's an event specifically for collegiate athletes who are interested in public safety positions. We currently have about 400 registered attendees, and would encourage anyone who is interested in a career in law enforcement to please join us this Saturday at the Hayward Police Department. And there is a QR code on the flyer that is on the screen to register. So wanted to share that with members of the public. And then wanted to let everyone know that last night at the Hayward Area Recreation District Board of Directors study session, there was a presentation on the status of the La Vista Park that was provided by city staff and Surface Design, Inc., who are the designers for the project. The majority of comments made by board members expressed concerns for the cost of the project, which I think was echoed here by the council when we met several weeks ago, along with sentiment that hard staff was not involved enough in the vetting of the park features and overall design. Concerns about future maintenance and the need for an MOU addressing funding were also conveyed. The unanimous consensus was that city staff and hard staff would meet in the next few weeks to address the concerns raised at the study session to possibly reduce the overall cost of the project and the mutual goal of finalizing plans and proceeding with bidding the project as soon as possible. So just wanted to share that follow-up on La Vista Park. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to move on to our action items, so our consent calendar, items 1 through 5. I didn't get no one asked me to pull anything, so I will entertain a motion.
I'll move the items.
Moved by Councilmember Andrews.
I'll second.
The second by Councilmember Roche, and if there are no objections, the item will unanimously pass. Next, I'd like to move on to our work session. We have item number 6, community agency funding, fiscal year 2025, community agency funding recommendations for services, arts and music, and economic development and infrastructure, an overview of the fiscal year 2025 annual action plan. And to kick this off, I believe we're going to have our Assistant City Manager, Regina Youngblood.
Good evening, Mayor and
Thank you.
Council. I'm going to turn it right over to Dr. Amy Cole-Bloom.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be here with you all at my first in-person council meeting. It's really exciting to be in chambers with you. I just wanted to quickly, before I hand it over to my team member, Emily Huang, say thank you to our community services commissioners. I think you all are familiar with the effort that they put into this process. A few of them are with you tonight to help answer any questions you have about deliberations. We're really excited to have them here. And I also want to thank our team. Emily jumped right into this process, one of her first projects on our team, and I'm excited to turn it over to her.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, Council. My name is Emily Huang, Management Analyst with the Community Services Division, also former Management Fellow with the City Manager's Office. Tonight I'm here to offer an overview of the CDBG Annual Action Plan and the CSC's funding recommendations as part of the community agency funding process for fiscal year 2025. As this is a work session, we will be presenting the information and recommending that Council review and offer feedback on 2 items. The first item is the overview of the annual action plan, and the second item is the community agency funding recommendations for fiscal year 2025. So before anything else, I'd like to invite council members to share any potential conflicts of interest or disclosures related to community agencies that are funded through this process at this time.
So there, I think, well, I'm a member of the St. Rose Foundation board, and so Councilmember Cermeño and I are both board members on the St. Rose Foundation. So when we get to that item much later down the road, we'll certainly recuse ourselves. Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. I have a ongoing business relationship with the CEO of Be a Mentor. So my relationship has nothing to do with that organization, but I do have a business relationship with the CEO of that organization.
And my mother serves on the board of the Hayward Arts Council. I believe I discussed this with the city attorney last year. It doesn't constitute a conflict of interest, but I wanted to share that for the sake of transparency.
Thank you for that.
I also have a conflict. My mom is a child care provider with 4 Cs.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for that. We can move on to the next slide. Great, yeah. It's both Amy and I's first time in person as well. So the next slide is the overview of the fiscal year 2025 annual action plan. The annual action plan carries out the consolidated plan, which is updated every 5 years. On June 23rd, 2020, the council approved the current consolidation plan, which covers fiscal year 21 through 25. The annual action plan summarizes the actions, activities, and also guides the city's federal CDBG entitlement investment decisions for fiscal year 2025, also HUD program year 2024. This addresses the priority needs and goals identified in the current consolidation plan. Those priority needs include expanding and improving public infrastructure and facilities, preserving, protecting, and producing housing stock, offering public services and quality of life improvements, and offering economic development activities. At the end of this meeting, there will be time for council to discuss and ask any questions related to the annual action plan. We'll also cover how to make public comment for feedback on the annual action plan, which started yesterday on April 1st and will be running through May 2nd. So before advancing to the next slide, I'll actually be moving on to economic development and infrastructure for discussion, which includes discussion for funding recommendations for St. Rose. While St. Rose is not currently set to receive funds through this year's process, Mayor Salinas and Councilmember Zermeño did disclose a conflict as they are members of the board. So we'd kindly ask them to recuse themselves from this discussion, and we'll invite them back after we're done.
Which is fine. I know, yeah. But actually, I have a question for the city attorney. So the mayor and the mayor pro tem are going to both leave the room. So who's next? Do the previous mayor pro tem? Mayor pro tem Andrews. Interim Mayor Pro Tem Andrews. Okay.
Management analyst Emily Wong, would you like to move forward the presentation?
Sure, yeah. All right, so our first category of funding to review is economic development and infrastructure, and that is funded through CDBG funds, community development block grant funds. The CSC recommends to council to fully fund 5 agencies and partially fund 3. They did not recommend funding to St. Rose this year, which they haven't spent down their previous awards, fiscal year 21 through 23. So the CSC would like to see this agency spend down their funds before they receive any more award. They also did not recommend funding to We Care, or also known as Upwards, the reason being that the CSC wanted to prioritize local Hayward-based nonprofit agencies. And to add, they added an amendment to the home rehabilitation program due to vendor changes. Staff did want to daylight that Rebuilding Together Oakland will be closing, so they won't be able to administer their portion of the home rehab program moving forward. And the CSC voted to amend this language. Rather than allocating the $150,000 to Rebuilding Together Oakland, they recommended to allocate this fund specifically to the home rehab program, with another vendor to be determined by staff before the start of fiscal year 2025. And staff is already engaging in conversations with alternative vendors and feeling optimistic that there won't be any gap in services for this portion. Next, we can move on to clarifying questions, and then we'll go to public comment and council discussion related to economic development and infrastructure projects.
Okay, now we'll open up to clarifying questions. Is there any clarifying questions from council? Councilmember Roche.
Thank you. So you said in the St. Rose one, that's really just because they haven't spent that down. Okay, so, and then what about on the, I just want to make sure I'm in the right category. Yeah, the South Hayward Parish, we've given them significant funds in the past, and so the recommendation was much lower this year. So I'm wondering about that.
It's a similar situation to St. Rose. They have a pretty substantial fund balance, and so the CSC identified one line item in their application that seemed like it could be done efficiently and quickly, and so they allocated funds for that specific line item for next year, with the message to the agency that the expectation is that they spend down their existing fund balance as well.
Okay. All right. So you're working with them on that.
Uh-huh.
So this is, yeah, I mean, sort of it's a
Yeah.
shocking amount, but okay. Okay. I think that was it for this downtown. Oh, in the, in the downtown streets. Okay. No, I was glad to see about that. Okay. I think that's all for clarifying questions. Thank you.
Can you go over the 5 agencies again, just their names and the amounts?
The ones that had been awarded?
Yes.
Yeah, let me pull that up. So I see Central Community Partners for their technical assistance program, 4Cs, the home rehab program.
Just for the
And-
public, because they can't, it's not up on the screen, so.
I think I'm missing. And the Habitat for Humanity East Bay home repair program. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and Love Never Fails Choose Tech IT Biz.
Okay,
Project.
thank you. All right, Councilmember Bonilla Jr.
Thank you, Councilmember Andrews. To Councilmember Andrews' point, can we get the spreadsheet to show on this main screen when we're going through each of these? Because we're seeing this, and I think it would be helpful for folks to see what we're seeing an attachment to. And then while you guys are figuring that out, my question about the funding recommendations, what is the issue with St. Rose and South Hayward Parish in terms of not spending down their funding?
It's been a few different things. On the St. Rose side, they received those funds. Oh, sorry, one sec. Geraldine, do you mind working with Emily to get the spreadsheet up that they're asking for? Yeah, we've got it here. So with St. Rose, they received those initial funds kind of like over a 3-year span for different projects, all of which were drops in the bucket for much larger projects. And so we worked with them instead to consolidate those 3 awards into one for one project. So that took some time. And then it was complicated by COVID, construction delays, that kind of like health and safety. They are moving now. We're really excited. They've got a great management team. They're working closely with us. So they're making good progress. Very similar on the South Hayward Parish side. There have been delays on the construction side of things, and we are getting more momentum now. But because of our timeliness constraints with CDBG funds, it is not a risk that staff is comfortable taking to lock up another 6-figure contract while we're still trying to spend down those others to meet our timeliness obligations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks for this initial part of the report. And my question was around the Downtown Streets team. I know their focus is on downtown. Was there any conversation during their interviews around expanding their program to encompass more parts of Hayward so that cleanup attention is being paid across the city?
I don't know if it happened in their interview, but they have a separate contract with Environmental Services and our Public Works and Utility where they look at the Tennyson area. So they do also serve other parts of the city, just not through this specific contract.
Got it. And so I'm hearing that for Tennyson. Is there any thought being given towards West Hayward or Hesperian, or is that in development? Do you know?
I'm not aware of any of those conversations, but we can follow up with Downtown Streets.
Great. Thank you.
You have Councilmember Roche.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask again on some of the things, like you said, was it the Oakland Home Repair Program or the, on that one, did the Community Services Commission get to weigh back in on how to reallocate those dollars, once you found out some of these details?
Yeah, so we have in our action plan to HUD, as well as our general plan, a home rehab program. And historically, the home rehab program has been made up of 2 vendors. One is Habitat for Humanity, and the other is Rebuilding Together. Habitat does larger scale home rehabs, like your roof repair, HVAC, whereas Rebuilding Together does smaller in-home repairs to help folks age in place. And so the discussion that we had with the CSC was we've got now a vacuum for that smaller repair piece. but it is still something that we've committed to with HUD to do this home repair broad
okay.
program. So we're currently having conversations with other Rebuilding Together branches, and I think optimistic about working with a different Rebuilding Together, not the Oakland one, to continue doing those same services.
Okay.
We just weren't able to get that lined up in time for the CSC's recommendation.
Okay, and because I guess the other question I had is, finding some of these things out, like South Hayward Parish, like the Oakland group, like St. Rose, would they have sort of fully allocated La Familia, if those things had been, shuffled around?
It's a non-competitive part of the application process, that $300,000 bucket for home rehab, so it's sort of a different pot.
Okay.
And I don't have concerns about the timely expenditure of the home rehab money. I'm really optimistic that we'll have a vendor in place by July 1.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to public comment for this section. We have a public comment from Carlos Archuleta. Did you want to speak on this portion? Okay.
Y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question was, when I was listening earlier, most of the funding that you're trying to gear towards is Hayward-based programs. Is that correct?
Do you want to comment from staff regarding this question?
Yes, it is specifically for Hayward community members.
Thought so. So me volunteering in the unincorporated for literally like the past 10 years, that's been my entire life, and it's been out of Eden United Church. And so Eden United Church is, though it goes to Nate Miley's office and asks for lots of money, they usually say the entire unincorporated area, but everybody knows that it's primarily Cherryland, and really Cherryland Elementary School, and it's really about the same 10 parents of Cherryland Elementary School. And so I noticed they're getting the second amount of money, the highest amount of money, and they're an organization that is primarily based for a whole different area. And they're funded by Nate Miley's office, which has a county budget of billions, versus Hayward, who only has so many slices of pizza, right? And so I'm wondering why a organization that is based not in Hayward, that's primarily targeting people who don't live in Hayward, why they're getting the second amount of money. And my concerns is because that church holds a lot of candidate forums, and we, as a board member on one of those boards that works with that church, we were purposely instructed not to ask Mark Salinas questions during that candidate forum. And so I'm wondering, like, hey, that draws a big, thing of suspicion right there. Like, hey, this organization that's taken, important resources, money that could help out. I'm sure there's 1 million churches in Hayward that desperately $50,000 every single year are going to be like, man, here in actual Hayward, because let's be honest, not only does that church not have no reach in North Hayward, how's it going to reach South Hayward? It's really suffering, which they have no footprint at all whatsoever. And so I got to ask that, what was kind of like the priority? How did you guys prioritize picking some over others? Because it kind of feels like, again, with that church being protected by the county, that's Nate's #1 church, they got a huge budget. County got a real budget, but Hayward doesn't. So how are we prioritizing making cuts to certain places, but picking places that aren't even in Hayward? What was the process on that? Can I ask that?
We can't respond to public comment, but we were allowed to ask that question of staff, so.
Well, I appreciate you guys listening to me, and I just hope that all of the residents, want to know where their tax dollars are going. #2 organization to get it isn't even in Hayward, primarily doesn't even focus one bit on Hayward. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Eden United Church is taking a really powerful grant that I'm sure every church in Hayward is like, bro, we're here in Hayward, primarily focused on Hayward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next comment we have from Austin Bruckner Carrillo. Did you want to speak to this portion later? Okay. Calvin Wong, did you want to speak to this portion? Same. Jesse Gunn, I'm assuming. Sandra Archuleta, did you want to speak to this portion? Okay.
super short. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about FESCO. I saw that they got good funding for the, what is that? The one part of it, I think it was the homeless emergency services, which is great, but they had asked for 375 for the economic development, but only got 15. And I just really want to advocate for them to get the funding that they asked for. I work at La Familia, and I actually shared a office with FESCO because that's a fiscal sponsor. And I work with so many caseworkers that are literally sitting in my office, helping people find jobs, helping them find resources, helping them find all of these things. I know families that have been out of the shelter for 5+ years that still come back for those types of services. And so I can see why you could say, well, we funded them for, emergency shelter, but not economic development. I think they're two different things. And I think that FESCO does an amazing thing, which is one of the only shelters that keeps families together, and it helps people thrive. And I think that they are someone that has the trust and the ability to reach people where they are, not just to find emergency shelter, but also to really uplift their lives, to get jobs. Like, I'm telling you, they're literally on there helping them fill out applications, going over their responses, prepping them for interviews. I mean, people bring in their dogs sometimes into our office. Like, I just really think they should get the full funding they asked for because they deserve it. The people at the shelter are amazing, and they just really care about their clients. So I'm just gonna say, give them the full $48,000 that they want, because FESCO does amazing work. And I just really want to highlight that from a coworker's perspective, someone that sees them every day doing that economic development work, like on the ground for real, not like photo ops and stuff like that, like sitting there with their members, meeting them like in random places. Like, you know how many times people flake on these kinds of appointments? 1,000,000 times. You make an appointment with them, people don't show up. They call them and are like, oh, you're on, A Street, kind of hanging out at the bus stop, I'll meet you there. That's the kind of dedication that those people have, and that's why I think they deserve the full funding for the economic and infrastructure money that they're asking for. FESCO's amazing, and they should be fully funded for anything they ask for, because they do the job. Thank you.
Thank you. And just making a note that for Mr. Archuleta's comments, that's going to be for the public services section in relation to Eating United. So we'll just make a note of that. All right. Next, we'll have comments from the dais. All right, Councilmember Roche.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, and I think that's what I was asking for. What was the discussion on the FESCO? I was sort of getting at that before when I was asking about, did the community services get to weigh in after there was some understanding about funding?
Yeah, sorry I didn't address the FESCO. It was a similar thing where they looked at the budget and identified a portion of what was asked for. We also have members of the ARC here if we want to have the commissioners speak to this as well. I don't want to put them on the spot, but if you all want to add to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, if the members of that, because I always like to know what the discussion was, but it sounds like there's technical staff information. And if you want to add anything on the ARC on that one, I'd be curious.
Hi, I'm Calvin Wong. I'm a CSC commissioner. Just speaking on the funding for FESCO, we just saw that their funding application was primarily to have funding for a security system for their location. And so within our ARC discussion, we deliberated and thought that maybe 48,000-ish was a bit high for a security system for the location of their size. And so we then went with considering all the other programs and the discussions around them and providing them funding, we concluded consensus at 15,000 was a good number, and considering all of the other agencies also requesting funding. So it was like that context as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here to answer questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Bonilla Jr.
Thank you. My question was also around FESCO. Considering, their request was 48,000 and it's for a security system, will they be able to do anything with the 15,000? Will the project still be able to move forward, or is it like, did we help them find alternate means of funding? I guess it seems like a pretty big gap here. So how are we addressing that?
We haven't had those conversations with FESCO yet, but when we get council's final recommendations on funding, part of what we do is then kind of negotiate the budget with the vendors and give them the opportunity if they need to slightly shift the scope or adjust their goals and outcomes. So we would have that conversation with FESCO, but we haven't had it yet.
Got it. If there's available funds in this category, because you see organizations aren't spending them down, or if there's revisions to these numbers, that might be a good place to consider increasing funding in the future.
Yes, and I should have said this more explicitly. All of the community development block grant recommendations are made based on an estimate. We don't know our award for next year yet, so we do a conservative estimate, and then the CSC, the members of the application review committees, make recommendations for how to distribute any additional funds. And I can't remember off the top of my head, I believe it's in the staff report, but FESCO is one of the ones I think would be receiving additional funding, but they take that into consideration.
That's great to hear. And I know a lot of hard work went into these recommendations, so I appreciate what the CSC has done, all of the applicants for coming forward with their applications. And then I also appreciate everything staff has put in for the diligence and for the monitoring and everything that goes in after this. So these recommendations look good for me in this category. Thank you.
Councilmember Syrup?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the recommendations in this category. For the public's information, we have commissioners that we appoint from all across the city representing different neighborhoods. When we go through the application process, we actually look at a map of applicants to make sure that different parts of our city are being represented. And so the recommendations we're receiving tonight are a result of those commissioners' work. I also just wanted to ask the question around other funding sources. So just for the public's knowledge, we're not typically the only source of funding they're applying for. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it's one of the things that commissioners look at when they're reviewing applications, is they often will prioritize and look for agencies that are leveraging multiple funding sources.
Got it. And then I guess a follow-up, and maybe this is something a commissioner can answer, is for the amount of funding FESCO got specifically for the cameras, were they pursuing other funding options? And were they one of the organizations that was given a slightly lower amount, given that they could apply to other places or string together funding for that project? I don't know if staff or a commissioner has an answer to that.
I don't at this exact moment have their budget in front of me, and I doubt that their commissioners can remember that off the top of their head, but we can look into that.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to go to Councilmember Goldstein first, then Councilmember Roche.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the great work that the community service commissioners have done. It's a long, drawn-out process with applications and meetings and consultations and questions and so forth. And you guys did a really fine process, and I want to commend you on that. And I am in agreement with these recommendations. Thank you.
Councilmember Roche.
Thanks. Just one more thing, since you are looking for recommendations from us too. I support the recommendations as they are, but if there is extra funding, I would also support FESCO getting full funding or more funding on this, if that's going to help them get their security system up and running. Thank you.
And then I'll make a comment as well regarding FESCO. 15,000 seems low for a security system for a commercial building, but I would resort to staff looking into that. All right, and I do have a public comment for Public One. We did close this section of this work session. Did you want to comment regarding infrastructure or the next one? This one? Okay, come on down. Public number one.
Hello again. My concern with this, as with any other of what the city or any other public entity, agency, government agency, is providing funding for using taxpayers' dollars, is that there doesn't seem to be an effectiveness checklist where the public, people who are supposed to be applying for these services, other than going to the agencies themselves, don't know who is funding these places, aren't able to make comments to these people who are funding these kind of agencies to say whether they've been able to be helped or not. I'm concerned that agencies like yourself are not doing a checkup on these agencies of how effective that they're being. And seems to be public negligence in that aspect, in my opinion. So that people like ourselves don't have to be fearful of retaliation or lashback from any such agencies, I would recommend and suggest that you provide this avenue for people to make these comments about these agencies, about how effective they are. I suggest that to be responsible entities yourself for overseeing these programs, that you do what you call in accounting or whatever, what's the term? Yes, an audit of various kinds of effectiveness, of efficacy, of just going down the list, et cetera, et cetera. Any regular business who's going to be successful does these steps. Any program that is going to be successful does these steps, unless you're just using this money as to give for favoritism, for votes, whatever, is what it would appear to the general public, that it does not serve in the best interests of the general public who is supposed to serve, that people are just getting jobs out of it, sitting comfortable, receiving these fundings, and not providing help, actual help, other than being established in name only to do so and so, but never doing it more than 95% of the time. And it stands to say, the way these agencies are being operated, like the ones I mentioned before in my other area, it seems that they're being tied with the hands of their funders, that if you don't give them the authorization to help a certain person, those people don't get help, even if they need it.
Thank you. You have something? Councilmember Roche?
Yeah, I just want to, just in response, I just wanted to ask Ms. Koblum or Ms. Swing to just answer to the rigorous auditing process that these agencies do have to go through.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment. Staff, so we monitor the recipients of funds in several different ways. Each applicant is required to submit reports. The frequency depends on what their funding source is, but it's either semi-annual or quarterly. We review those reports, and if we see anything that triggers a concern, like really low outcome reporting or inconsistent data, we follow up immediately. And then we do a monitoring process each year where we review those reports, review reimbursements, and we have a risk assessment that we go through for each of the 50+ agencies that we fund. And for those that receive a certain score above a threshold, they get triggered for more than a desk audit, so an in-person monitoring visit. And so, for example, when we did that last year, I believe we ended up doing 5 or 6 in-person visits that were triggered based on that assessment. And we use resources from HUD from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to structure that process.
Thank you for answering that, because I think sometimes there is an appearance that these are entered into lately, but we know that they're not, and that they're often funding for specific programs too, and not general operations. So thank you. Looks like something's going on. Thank you very much for answering that question.
We're gonna pause the meeting for 5 minutes. Thank you. Give us 5 minutes. Thank you. isolation. Oh. He- So do we want to have the mayor, did we have any other comments? Okay, we can move on to the next section. And can we request for the mayor and Councilmember Zameo to return? And Councilmember Bonilla Jr. is back with us. So we are.
Hello. All right, I think we can move forward. Great.
Okay, we're back, and I hope everything is okay. Perfect, okay, thank you.
Great. So welcome back. We have 3 remaining categories to review and receive council's feedback. The first category is public services, which is funded by CDBG funds. For public services category, the CSC recommended to fully fund 4 agencies up to their funding caps, to partially fund 6 agencies, and also did not recommend funding to 1 agency. That agency was Big Brothers and Big Sisters, because they wanted to prioritize local mentoring organizations that have connections to HUSD and local Hayward nonprofits and partners. The second category is social services, which the CSC had recommended full funding to 10 agencies, partial funding to 9, and did not recommend funding to 1 agency, which was Eden Youth and Family Center's Empowering Entrepreneurs program. They were applying to multiple programs, this one in their Computer Clubhouse program. As we all know, this is a competitive process, and the CSC prioritized distributing funds to a diverse range of agencies and avoiding offering multiple awards to just 1 agency. When asked which one they wanted to prioritize, they had prioritized the Computer Clubhouse program. And the third category for your review and feedback is arts and music. The CSC had recommended to fully fund 7 agencies, 6 of them being returning agencies and 1 being a new one, partially fund 1 agency, and offer no funding to 1 new agency, which was the Community Meditation Program. This was because they had believed this program was a little too early in their stages to effectively compete for funding from the city. And the CSC had thought that they needed a little more experience in capacity building before operating independently and receiving funds from the city. At this point, we're near the end of this presentation, and we've reviewed the annual action plan and remaining categories for the agency funding process. So now we can move on. I'll just review really briefly next steps. For this process for the public. So moving forward, the public comment period for both the funding recommendations for this process and also the annual action plan will be running until May 2nd. And you can submit public comments to me at emily.huang@hayward-ca.gov. Staff will be coming back to bring all the information that council has provided and the information that the public has provided to the public hearing to finalize these recommendations. And then finally, in May 15th, we will finalize our annual action plan, which will bring together and summarize this information, and we can submit that CDBG for federal funding. So moving forward and to end, we can move on to clarifying questions on services in arts and music, and also any feedback on the annual action plan, and then move to public comment.
Thank you. And just for a point of clarification on process, typically in a work session, we go to public comment. And then, okay, that's what I thought. All right. All right. So I'd like to move to public comment. Our first public commenter is the chair of the CSC, Austin Bruckner Carrillo.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have the honor of chairing the City of Hayward's Community Services Commission. I want to take a quick moment to thank Council, City staff, my fellow commissioners, and most importantly, each and every applicant, person who called in during public comment, service provider, staff member at the various nonprofit organizations for being a part of this process. As someone who runs a grassroots nonprofit organization myself, it operates out of a storage facility and around my kitchen table. I understand how burdensome this process is. I know we have a number of former commissioners who now serve on this council, some of whom served quite a while ago, and some of whom served more recently, such as Councilmember Syrop. This process has changed greatly over the years, in large part due to added requirements from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and in part direction from this council. Some, not all of these changes, were positive, and some have made the process more streamlined and easier and more accessible. For example, commissioners can no longer do site visits, which has leveled the playing field more or less for first-time applicants that may not have a physical space to show you. Combining this with the implementation of an online portal, the community agency funding process is much less time-consuming for commissioners than it has previously been. However, I'm going to assume that this is not the case for city staff, and it certainly is not the case for our nonprofits who have to take the time to apply. City staff works diligently in conjunction with these organizations, and I'm proud that through our 2022 Community Agency Subcommittee, which I served on, alongside our now Mayor Salinas, and the Vice Chair of the Community Services Commission, Linda Moore, we have implemented some changes to this process that make it easier for first-time applicants, such as changes to the physical sponsor. And this has allowed a historic number of new and first-time nonprofits to apply. During my first appointment interview for this commission, I spoke of the need to diversify the pool of applicants that receive this funding. I believe in a funding process that's accessible, transparent, and that gives small nonprofits, including those who use physical sponsors, an equal chance at receiving these funds. I want to conclude by really encouraging council to develop some guidelines for folks that may have conflicts of interest, specifically those potentially running for public office. I ask that city staff and the city attorney work to develop some guidelines for community services commissioners. Really need to see that across all of our different commissions. I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge the chairs of the different ARCs, Jesse Gunn, who chaired our arts and music, Colin Thuramoto, who chaired our economic development ARC, who is represented today by Calvin Wong, our services ARC, who is chaired by the ever wonderful Linda Moore, who is represented today by Lenita Willer, and I want to also recognize Mariana, the last commissioner who's in attendance. Thanks so much.
If I was going to give you a few more seconds if you need them, because given that you're the chair.
No, I appreciate it. Happy to answer any questions that folks have about the process. I have asked that each of our ARC chairs really take leadership roles today to speak to the exact questions that happened in their ARC. I'm here today as chair to offer any kind of overall questions or to support my colleagues on the commission as needed. So I just want to thank you all.
Perfect, thank you. And okay, our next speaker is Jesse Gunn.
Thank you so much. First of all, I also wanted to thank the city staff and our city council liaison, Councilmember Goldstein, as well as all of the applicants and all of the commissioners. This is my first time going through this process, also my first time chairing an ARC, and so I was very conscious of relying on people who are well-versed in this process to kind of guide me and help me out here. I'm very proud of the fact that we didn't all agree from beginning to end. There were some conversations to be had and some compromises to be made, and I think that's a sign of a healthy process where we can actually dive in deeply into these sorts of funding requests. And so I don't have anything quite as large as far as a public comment. I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity and say that I also am available for questions if you have any for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next commenter is Commissioner Wong, Calvin Wong.
Hello. Yes, my name is Calvin Wong, and I am on the CSC. And so I was a member of both the Arts and Music ARC and the Economic Development and Infrastructure ARC. So I'll just like to briefly touch on both. And so in terms of the Arts and Music category, something that was in my mind was thinking about providing opportunities for people of all ages, which was something emphasized during my interview for the commission. And so in doing so, our recommendations do reflect that. And so many of our recommendations to fund projects go to projects that promise to bring dignity for people of all ages and circumstances, whether that's giving them a fresh start because they've fallen on bad luck or had hard times, or because they may have had difficult life circumstances, such as recommending funding for the Love Never Fails Healing Arts. And we also recommend funding for projects who try to give youth opportunities and try to figure out what they're really interested in, whether that is with musical instruments or art on a canvas. And so looking a lot at also program funding for educational programming activity aimed at enriching the culture and activity for all members of the Hayward community. And I'm particularly excited about the two new projects being funded, which are Plethos Productions and the Kwanzaa Project, and looking forward to seeing them succeed with the funding and also technical assistance provided by staff during that process. And then on the economic development and infrastructure category, we notably recommended funding for projects that aim to facilitate a healthy micro-enterprise environment, especially those that provide critical service to the community, such as that of childcare. And we also recommended funding for projects that are aimed to or have a nexus to providing career development, which will significantly benefit low and moderate income Hayward residents. And so, it's just to conclude, and this is my first time on the CSC, and so this is my first time going through the process, and I really appreciate being able to learn about the different organizations that provide all these wonderful services in the community, and also this entire process of how it is for organizations to get funding. And so I also really appreciated the opportunity to deliberate with members of the commission and, like Jesse said, change and ebb and flow in our recommendations to come to a consensus. And so I thank the City Council for giving me this opportunity and here to provide answers to any questions I might be able to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Archuleta. Okay. Next speaker is Carlos Archuleta. Okay, thank you. Okay, and then I know we have, I don't know if she just left her hand up, but Shubi, Aishita, Aisha, I don't know if go ahead, if this is the second time you're speaking.
Yeah, good evening. I just want to say good evening, council members and city staff. I just want to say thank you to the city staff, to the commissioners and the council member. I really appreciate the work all the city staff did. Emily and our bosses, you did a tremendous job during this time supporting us, being a new agency on this ground. But I just want to reiterate the fact that we're really, really in need of increased funding. And also in recent years, our cities has faced unprecedented challenges, including economic downturns and the ongoing impact of the global pandemic. This has resulted in families that were once, doing well, in need of food and financial stability. And I feel like despite our best effort to meet the growing demand, our agency went from serving 40 to 50 individuals in a day to serving over 400 people in a day. And it's been like a huge jump in 3 months. And we are even finding it difficult to put out banners outside because we don't think we can meet up. And we feel like this increased funding will help us to serve those in need effectively. And the current level of recommendation for funding is simply insufficient to sustain our operation and adequately support the increasing number of individuals and families who rely on us for essential food services and assistance. And we really implore you to look into the funding recommendation and give us the full funding we can get from the city, which will help us to do more and give us sustain us. We've tried to apply for other grants. Of course, we're still we need the support from our city as well. And we really appreciate if you can look into this and support our goal, support what we're trying to do for the city. And also, the reason why we're downtown Hayward is for accessibility and for people to be able to catch the bus, the train, and access us. And we're also helping the corridor based on the homeless situation around there. I own a business. I've been downtown Hayward for over 9 years, and I understand what's going on around the A Street and the Foothill corridor. And I've been working effectively to ensure that, we deal with the homeless situation and, the illegal dumping as well. And we're working with Abode. They refer their clients to us to do their shopping and to get food, to get clothing. And other agencies are referring people to us. Again, we work with a lot of senior housing as well. And we think we need this funding to help us sustain our project and what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our public comment. And I would like to start off. Before I call on Councilmember Syrup, I just wanted to kick things off by saying I wanted to thank the Community Services Commission for all your work. As you clearly saw, this is tough work. We got all this need, but yet, not enough money. And at the end of the day, your job is to distribute money to all of these great organizations doing a lot of great work. And trying to fill those gaps. And I think Chair Bruckner Carrillo made the point of, some of these organizations, they're housed out of storage units, and the organizing committee is over a kitchen table. And that's how these projects get organized. That's how strategies are made to really meet the needs of some of the most vulnerable individuals in our city. So I just wanted to thank the CSC for their service. And with that, I'd like to call upon Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you, Mayor. Some introductory comments. Also wanted to express my gratitude for the Community Services Commission. I miss serving on the commission, and I'm really happy to see the work that you're putting forward. I want to thank Community Services staff for helping shepherd the commission. This is a month-long process, and so I just want to commend you for getting us through it yet again. I think folks don't realize how difficult it is to run this year after year. And for the folks that raised some very valid concerns about transparency, accountability, auditing, we have an email on the screen for Emily Huang and also the Community Services Office. If there are any issues you're having with any of these vendors, any requests for information you're interested in making, the city is a public entity. We are available for you to ask these questions or report any issues that you're having with any of these organizations, so I encourage you to do so. I also want to thank the organizations that applied and for all the great work that they do in the Hayward community. And for the folks on the CSC that are here tonight presenting and representing the work that they did over the past few months, I think it's great you're here. I think it's so important that you stand by it and you're able to answer questions. I think a request that I have for staff in the next go around is I know we have a very strict 5-slide policy, but for something like this, it's important, I think, for the larger community to know what the entire timeline is like. I think this is a great advertisement for other organizations that might be interested in applying for this funding in the future as well. And for folks to understand what this process looks like, because yes, we ultimately approve the recommendations, but this is the product of a lot of thought between staff and close to 20 residents that are spread out across our city and representing a lot of different needs. So that's just my request for next time, because it seems like there was a little bit of confusion tonight. Some other general comments I want to make is we have seen the funding needs increase. So, a few years ago, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, the amount of funding available actually matched how much funding was being requested pretty neatly. But we've seen over the last 5 years that need increase. And so just some general feedback here is I don't like seeing organizations fight over the same scraps. I want to grow that pot so there's more funding available. And I'm in my head thinking someone's going to clip that, grow that pot. But anyway, the point here is we need more funding for our community services. And I think just as we approach our budget season, I guess a plea I'm making to the larger council as well is how do we consider increasing the kind of funding that's available for our community services, because these are one of the most cost-effective ways that we can amplify our impact across the community. So those are my general comments, and then just some questions really quickly for the sake of this section. I think O5 Seeks Eva does some great work around feeding the Hayward community. Although they requested a significant amount of funding, I was wondering if any of the commissioners or staff could speak to the $260,000 request versus the $10,000 that we're allocating this time around.
I'm going to let the commissioners speak to that first, and I can fill in if you have any follow-ups.
Good evening, Council. My name is Lanita Wheeler, and I was on this ARC. I'm going to read something that we had prepared for one of our meetings in regard to this. So of the $259,000, 166 recommendation, $10,000 was recommended. The ARC recommended to fund this agency at the same amount as last year for concerns around their data tracking and providing proof that their services serve specifically low-income Hayward residents, which was also communicated to the agency during the last year's application cycle. For this reason, the ARC recommended the same amount with the expectation that this agency would work with the city staff to improve their data collection process and the supplemental support in order to receive additional funds. Additionally, we applied the same evaluation to them that we did with other entities as well. We did receive some information after the application deadline, which we were not able to take into consideration.
Thank you. Staff, have anything else?
I would also add, because you called out that large amount that they requested, for the services ARC, there are funding caps. So based on council priority and the work that was done in 2022 to kind of reevaluate this process. And so the caps in the services ARC are for any agency that does homelessness services, they can be awarded up to $100,000. And any agency that does any of the other services, so education, legal services, food security, they can receive up to $50,000. And that's in the RFP, and we try and communicate that with folks, but you'll see there's a couple applicants that still applied for in excess of the cap.
Great, thank you. And then my only other question is in regards to the public comments that we received from Ms. Shuby. I don't know if I saw her organization on this list. Can you speak to maybe what that vetting looked like and the kind of support we can provide folks that are trying to figure out how to best work with our agency funding process?
I'll let our commissioners address that first again.
Good evening, Oster Buckner-Creer. I'm the chair of the Community Services Commission. As council knows, but I think for members of the public, this is a volunteer role for commissioners. Many commissioners, this is the first time that they are interacting with government. It's their first opportunity to serve on a body and to make any kind of recommendations to a decision-making body. I think at times there's a balance between how deep do you dive into an application and what is a 10-minute public comment or a Q&A session with each applicant amongst 6 or so other commissioners. How deep do you get? And sometimes from different applicants, commissioners maybe struggle to ask the question correctly. And in this particular instance, I believe that's what happened. At our subsequent Community Services Commission meeting, after having a conversation with the commissioner myself, the commissioner really went above and beyond to reiterate the intention behind the question, which I believe to be how is kind of the neighborhood receiving your services? Unfortunately, how the question kind of came across, I think there was a little bit of not in my backyard, which I do not believe was the intention of the question. So,
Thank you for the answer. And then just to be more, I appreciate that context. To be more specific, what is that specific business named as or listed as on this?
So if you go to the general fund services section of attachment 2, they're the fourth one from the top. So the agency name says Ruby's Place. That's because they're a fiscal sponsor for this agency. But the program is the Peace Haven Corporation's Freedom Store. And this is another one where they applied for an excess of the $50,000 cap. So their award is really $10,000 out of an available $50,000.
Understood. Okay, thank you for that. I've only heard positive things about this store and the work that it's doing in the community and providing free resources, especially for unhoused individuals. As we prepare as well to launch a navigation center, I could see these working in unison very well together. So if we're finding as allocations become final in the future and there is money floating around, I would be interested in seeing how we could support more. I do want to encourage Ms. Shuby to pursue other grant options. I believe she mentioned that online earlier. But free stores are a model I think has been proven successful, and I think it's very exciting that we have one starting downtown. Those are all my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Zermeño.
Mayor, thank you. And Mayor, thank you for the report, although I missed a couple of minutes, but that's all right. I have no questions, but I do have some comments. And the comments are that thank you for the deliberations, the decisions. They have been and are very, very difficult, and they will be more difficult in the future because just as we saw this year, 51 applicants, over $3 million in requests. We know because of the new system, there will be more applicants next year, and that's something that I believe is very valuable for our community. We do have many folks in need, and we know that others will be approached next year by those who have received funding. Hey, you ought to apply. This is a good program. So we will need definitely more money. I applaud the commission members for the hard work, the decision. That's good, tough 2 months. And then also, historically, we do receive many emails. Give me more money, give me more money. I don't like the system, etc. Last year, we received no emails, no complaints. And this year, we received one email and one public comment. So I think that's something very, very positive. So again, I thank you for a job well done. And let's go moving forward with more money. Let's go find some more money somewhere, okay? And thank you again.
Councilmember Andrews.
Thank you. Thank you to the Community Services Commission for your hard work on making these recommendations. Thank you to staff for working with the Community Services Commission on making these recommendations, and Councilmember Goldstein on being a liaison to this. Wanted to know about the partially or completely funded through opioid distributor settlement funds, and can you give a little bit more context to that?
Yes, so over the past several months, the city has agreed to participate in national settlement agreements for opioid distributor settlements. I think there's been 2 of them. And staff reviewed the eligible uses of those funds and determined that while we'll be getting them paid in installments between now and 2038, we have received a little over $100,000 to date and opted to distribute those funds through this process. That may not be the way that we distribute it moving forward, but we thought it would be appropriate to supplement given the high demand through this cycle. So those agencies that are specified as receiving money through that process are the agencies that are doing services that meet the eligibility requirements of how those funds can be used.
Okay, I would also like to advocate for more funds because $100,000 is a drop in the bucket from the impacts of opioids in our community.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's any way that we can write a letter of advocacy on behalf of the city, I would like to employ the mayor and the council to do that if that's possible.
Yeah, and these funds it's a statutory allocation based on the litigation settlement, so, but there are other legislative ways that we could request funding.
That'd be great. And then wanted to also get just clarification on the Peace Haven Corporation, the Freedom Store. So the max is $50,000. Is there, and did they only apply for the general fund portion of it, or did they apply for other parts of it? Because it is partially economic development, infrastructure.
So with new applicants, our practice is typically to start them with general fund money.
Okay.
Because CDBG money requires pretty significant infrastructure to comply with in terms of like administration. I mean, I've talked to some grant recipients. It costs them $5,000 in admin just to administer a CDBG grant.
I see.
This agency could potentially eventually qualify for public services CDBG money, but it's a real administrative burden, so we tend to go with the agencies that have the infrastructure in place to handle it.
Okay. I will also advocate for increased funds for that particular project, as well as the South Hayward Parish as another entity that provides services for the community who are experiencing homelessness. And then also would like to, if there's additional funds, reiterate it for FESCO. They do a lot of good work in the community, so if we can look at that particular organization, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bonilla, I believe. Yes, Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I want to reiterate my thanks to the Community Services Commissioners, the applicants who have applied. I know going through this process could be intimidating, so appreciate that, and also appreciate staff being so involved here as well. I think it's a great effort that pays dividends when we see the outcomes that these nonprofits have in our communities, and when we see those most vulnerable in Hayward served by these great and through these great services. So thank you, and I think that these recommendations are quite comprehensive. I know there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, so really appreciate everyone's thoughtfulness. Just a few questions. Under CDBG Public Services, we're funding about $46,000 for LVNs at 2 high schools. Why are we funding that and not the school district? I mean, what was the rationale to fund this?
I will let a commissioner address that.
Excellent, thank you.
Hello, evening again, Lanita Wheeler. We had asked this same question during deliberations, and the response that we received was that the funding source that the school district has available to them for these nurses is reimbursed. And they were requesting for the city to support them to have the initial funds to begin to pay the staff persons, which would allow them the time to be able to generate the reimbursements to where they could then, participate with the source that the school district provides them.
Got it, thank you. What 2 high schools are going to be the lucky recipients of these LVNs?
I'm sorry, I don't have the notes here, but I know it's in the application. Perhaps staff has it.
I'm hoping one of them is going to be Tennyson.
It's Hayward and Tennyson.
Excellent, thank you. All right, while you have the mic keyed up, I also had a question around the 05 Shashiva. You know, I understand that there's maybe some administrative issues with getting some data reported in, but I think the work they do is pretty phenomenal. So just wondering how we rationalized a computer clubhouse for $44,000 over potentially, food for folks in our community who I think need food more than computers, but I would love to hear your perspective.
The ARC did prioritize agencies who were focusing on housing, food security, youth, and services that supported families. At the time that we were completing our deliberations, that's what we had the information in the application from. I don't recall other members of the ARC having any personal interaction or anecdotal information to help build the story from what we had access to. What we had access to was what was in the portal at the time when we had met and what we were told we could use. And so the applications that you see receive greater funding, we had our rubric that was provided to us throughout the portal that helped us to identify sort of, I think, like on a scale of 1 to 10, and sort of what types of markers would qualify for a 2 score versus an 8 score. And at the time of deliberations, you'll see the agencies that receive greater funding, they provided the information that allowed us to evaluate them in a way that allowed us to provide the higher score in the rubric, as well as any anecdotal information that we could use to supplement it.
Got it. Thank you. I would encourage staff to work with that applicant to provide technical assistance in whatever way we need to make sure that we're getting the data that we need. So next year when we come to this funding process, we'll have the data, I think, to fund this applicant a little bit more for such a critical service. I think $10,000 for feeding folks in our communities, a drop in the bucket, that's not going to make a huge impact. So just really want to find how we work through those technical barriers so we can fund an agency or an organization that's having the type of impact that this one is. Other than that, I think these are great recommendations, and thank you so much for being here tonight to answer our questions. It's so useful to hear from the folks that are involved in these decisions. So thank you again, and thank you for your hard work.
It's my pleasure.
Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my thanks to the Community Services Commission, for the chair, Buckner Courier, for being here, and the members of the ARCs for being here, because you add that nuance to the discussion and why you got certain places, and the thoughtfulness, Calvin, your thoughtfulness and how you analyzed your ARCs nonprofits. It's just so helpful to know, to have that information. So thank you very much for being here. I wanted to ask, there's one thing I wanted to ask kind of along the same lines as the Freedom Store and the 5-6 SIVA is, I noticed that almost all of the general fund services that were asking for food giveaways, none of them got the full $50,000. The only one I see is Spectrum Services for Seniors, which I'm happy about that, don't get me wrong. So I'm wondering, was there some purposeful reason why the food pantries weren't given, so it's 5-6 SIVA, Daily Bowl, San Lorenzo Food Pantry, and the Freedom Store, none of them got the full $50,000, and I'm wondering what the discussion was around that, if anyone has any sort of information about that.
We are a team on the Community Services Commission, so we will take this together.
Yeah, great. All the information.
Regarding Daily Bowl, they were a first-time applicant. Much like 5-6 SIVA, unfortunately, their application, I think, in at least the majority of our ARC's opinion, was lacking some components. And from an equity perspective, if you are applying standards to one application, we have an expectation when we're making a recommendation to council to apply that same standard to every applicant. What I will add, Commissioner Mueller did a great job, in my opinion, for 5-6 SIVA. We explained this when the organization came back at our last CSC meeting, and while I won't speak for the organization, it is recorded, the public meeting. I do believe that they heard our call, as well as Daily Bowl, to really take advantage of that staff assistance to make sure that your application is complete. Those are the two, and there were a couple of organizations.
The San Lorenzo Food Pantry and the Freedom Store.
San Lorenzo Food Pantry, my understanding is they are relatively new. They recently relocated to Hayward. Their Hayward roots are really not that deep, with all due respect.
Okay, and then the Freedom Store. I guess what I'm asking is, given that, looking down, the trend is that none of the food giveaways in the general fund services did get a full services, and given the important work that, the ones I know, 5-6 SIVA, they show up and they don't ask questions, and so I guess maybe just pause for a second if you don't mind staying there, but maybe to staff, because I do understand, the need for the Community Services Commission to be able to gauge that it's going to low-income individuals, but I know part of the wonderful thing they do is they will just show up when somebody asks, and so partly by design, for them to stop and collect that information is difficult. So I understand why Community Services made that decision, because that's what we asked. So how do we guide them? And I know the question was sort of asked, but how do we guide them and allow them to still be, still have the mission that they have?
One of the things that we've been discussing, and I would say respectfully, we need them to also kind of come to the table and work with us, because we have certainly, they applied last year and were given this feedback by the commission, and we encountered the same challenges in this year's application. I think through this process, they've already been more engaged after submitting their application, so I'm optimistic for next year. And one of the things, to get to your point about the data collection, we can replicate a model that we use on CDBG funds that's kind of area-based. So it may not be necessarily area, but they are, when they show up for schools that have predominantly free and reduced lunch student populations, we can use that as a proxy. They aren't receiving CDBG funds, so it doesn't need to be as rigorous. We aren't reporting this to HUD, but we still need to see that they are doing some sort of effort to be able to document who they're, like where they're doing these visits and how they can justify that based on predominantly the population of folks being served are low income. And so we're happy to work with them on identifying what those proxies are, so that they're not getting race and ethnicity and income level for every person who comes through. We understand that that's a burdensome thing. So we're happy to work with them on those alternatives. Yeah.
Okay, and then just to go back to the Freedom Store one also, was that sort of like just needing to work with them on providing the data for that one? Because I know, yeah, sorry, let me just reiterate that. Because again, I guess my overall question is, maybe this is a staff and a community services thing, is because none of the food security people or applicants received full funding, and looking at that now that there was sort of a trend, would you have done it differently, or did you just take it case by case? And I mean, I know that's all we ask of you, but there does seem to be sort of a glaring hole in that area.
Thank you. I can say that as it relates to the data and the statistics, the ARC was also willing to accept proxy information. At the time when we were deliberating, we didn't have that. And we even gave feedback saying, in the future, if they could even give us the range based off of they know they're in this area, or based off of they know the schools are in this area. But we really felt like we were blind, if you would. And so that's in regards to the data for both of these agencies. And we did request, which staff has already stated that they would do with that support and technical assistance. When you called out what appears to be the trend, we do this over 2 days, 8 to 8. And we're literally within our slots just going one at a time. They're not necessarily all grouped together for us to identify this is all food or this is all transportation or whatnot. But we can certainly say that we as an ARC had made a commitment at the outset to prioritize the agencies that were matching the priorities for the city, and housing and food rose to the top. But we were unable to make decisions with information that we didn't have available to us.
No, and I really appreciate you thinking through that and give me an answer on that, because I remember that you aren't looking at trends as you're doing this. You're taking the agencies as they come. So thank you. I just wanted to point it out, and I guess my recommendation is in this category, if we end up with extra money, I would ask the CSC to look at how they might allocate to especially some of the food security organizations.
Yeah, and just to clarify, and we'll present this data to you more in depth at the public hearing based on this feedback, but each ARC made recommendations for how the funds would be spent if there was extra money. So they've made those deliberations. And I would also say, just to add to what our colleagues in the CSC have said, specific to the food security and homelessness housing priorities, I wanted to call out that they prioritized homelessness and housing services, and then they did a pass-fed food, and they prioritized the food services that were serving seniors, which is why you see Mercy, Brown Bag, and Spectrum having those fully funded. And then they tried to kind of evenly distribute within the constraints of what the application had presented across the other food security applications.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm all for feeding seniors, so thank you. I did want to ask about the Eden, where is it? The Eden Church, I think that was brought up before. And it was to the a navigation program. And I just wanted to ask you to speak specifically to that specific program and why we're funding it, and from Hayward.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I actually speak high level about kind of the nature of that comment?
Please.
Because I want to just address the public comment.
Yep.
There are many agencies that don't operate directly in Hayward, but are required to serve Hayward residents through this funding. So I wanted to make that clear. We often get questions like, we're building together Oakland, what are we doing funding an Oakland agency? They are serving Hayward households, even though they may be based in other Bay Area cities. Specific to the Eden United Church of Christ and the Newcomer Navigation Service, they're receiving funding for the Newcomer Navigation that is located in South Hayward. It's a nav center for unaccompanied minors who are coming to Hayward, and they partner closely with the school district to place folks in that shelter. I don't think they've opened yet. They're still doing the construction, and I'm completely blanking on the name of the site of where they're located. Kelly, do you remember?
It's the SciAC Center, the old SciAC Center.
Yeah, so
Okay,
if you
and
go by
that's in
there,
Hayward.
that's what's happening in the back of the SciAC Center.
And that's physically located in Hayward.
It is in Hayward,
Yeah,
and is
right.
serving unaccompanied Hayward youth.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that clarification, because I figured that it was going to some program that was located in Hayward. And I think, let's see, I think that was it for, the Eden Youth and Family Center, there was one. Oh, no, never mind. You explained that you basically are going to, they had several applications this year for several programs, but they got services. Yeah, okay. Yep, I think that's it. Oh, and the last one is the Sun Gallery. That was a question I had about that. I was just curious about that one from the ARC. I mean, we're funding them basically the way we funded them in the past. I know they've asked for more. I've also heard that there are some potential issues going on at Sun Gallery, so I just wanted to ask about how that conversation went. Yeah, please, Mr. Gunn, come on.
All right, thank you so much. I believe Sun Gallery had requested more than they were able to be funded based on I believe it was the number of years that they have been operating. And so I believe the 20,000 was the max they could get based on our requirements.
Oh, was that the cap for the arts? And,
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, then never mind. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for answering those questions in an in-depth way. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of remarks before I conclude. One, I wanted to assure Councilmember Syrup, I did hear you. There are some presentations that take more than 5 slides, so I get it. And I also wanted to thank our team over there for keeping it keeping to the assignment, and I appreciate that. But if you need more than 5 slides, I can wiggle maybe 2 more slides. But anyways, I do that just, I know I've spoken to the council about this, but I do that so that we're all succinct and that we can be as concise as possible. But I understand that sometimes it takes more. I just wanted to also underline, and I did hear the chair, Austin Bruckner, talk about clearer rules on conflict of interest, but not only for candidates that are running for office, but also conflict of interest of just members who are involved in a lot of different things. Everybody's involved in more than one organization in Hayward. And so I think we really need to think through what are those conflicts, at what point do you need to leave the room, at what point can you stay, and just so that we're very clear. So I wanted to just acknowledge that, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Also, lastly, my two more points. Is the food space. The food space is a crowded space, and I've been, I am not a professional food, person, but I have been in this space for a very long time, and handling food is a very complex process and system. The first thing you have to do is procure it, or you have to gather it and collect it. And if you've worked with the food bank, or if you've worked with some of these other organizations, food comes in pallets, and food is sometimes room temperature, but if food comes to you cold, that creates another issue because you have to store it. And then if people take it home, then they have to figure out a way to store it. And then there's preparation. You have to cook it. And then if my experience working with the food bank, and I'm not saying this to say that it's a bad thing, but a lot of times you don't know what you're going to get at the food bank, at the distributions that are in the neighborhoods. So when families are getting food, they need to know recipes and how to cook it and the proper way of handling it. And that takes education, and that takes a whole other set of activities involved. And then probably the most expensive aspect to food, and Councilmember Syrup and I have had several conversations about this. Probably the biggest challenge in food is storage, cold storage, right? Not everybody has large refrigerators. And that is, and not only do you not have large refrigerators, but to buy a large refrigerator, it's pretty expensive to get one of these big commercial refrigerators. So the good news is this, and like I said, I'm only, I've been doing this for some time now. The good news is this, is that there are organizations that do specialize and are professionals along this food path, right? And I think to highlight, and I don't want to go too much into the details here, but I do want to highlight one organization is 5 Seek Siva. 5 Seek Siva is, these guys are incredible. They've completely taken a food truck, and they will go anywhere at any time, and they will feed any amount of people. And they do it successfully. They do it, the food is delicious. And they're not only in Hayward, they're all over the East Bay. And so, here is a group of community members that have just done a phenomenal job at doing this work. And I know that they also work with a lot of organizations. They're not only working with the city of Hayward, but they work with the Hayward Promise neighborhood, they work with school districts, they work with other local governments and other municipal governments. And so I say all of that because the food space it's an active space, it's a very complex space, and the amount of resources that we have, we may not be able to cover all of our bases when it comes to this food space, and it's it's a very complex space. But anyways, I say all of that too, also to underscore that the process to decide all of these grants and the process to decide what to give organizations, how much to give organizations, it's a tedious process, it's a complex process. And I, over the years, I've always trusted the Community Services Commission. I've been up here for some time now, and I don't think I've ever seen massive objection on any recommendations by the CSC. I think over the years we've honored and respected the work that you guys have all done through this process, and it is a tedious process. And I know we have some Community Services Commission alumni up here, and I know that you certainly take this task seriously. So I just wanted to conclude by saying thank you to all of you. Thank you for leading the ARCs, and I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. The neighborhoods certainly depend on it. And Chair Bruckner.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I just want to kind of conclude on some points that my colleagues may not have stressed, but I just want to thank you all for taking the time to be here today. Councilmember Syrup, you asked a question which I feel kind of mainly got at the heart of what is anti-bias work. Our last CSC meeting was actually adjourned very abruptly. There was a smell of smoke in City Hall. Luckily, we are all still here today. One of the things that I was planning on asking was that we agendize a refresher on our anti-bias training prior to starting next year's process. I don't believe that that is necessarily what occurred in this instance, but just a refresher on how do we ask questions correctly, how are we culturally sensitive and competent. I know there was a question regarding Eden Church. I encourage the public to go ahead and really take the time to dive into Eden Church's application and their deep, deep history here in Alameda County and their deep, deep history here in the city of Hayward. I would also remind, while we're talking about anti-biased, Eden United Church of Christ is headed by a loud and proud lesbian. Her name is the Reverend Dr. Arlene Naring, who has been sued by anti-LGBT groups across the country. At times, not necessarily pointing to any instance, members of the public struggle to see LGBTQ people in the faith community. They struggle to see a woman who is a white woman doing work with communities of color. The work that Reverend Arlene Naring does is real, it is authentic, and it is meaningful. And I'm proud to stand by our recommendation. I will, really kind of conclude with two final things. Siva does incredible work, and they are unfortunately kind of in the difficult part about doing business with the government of how do you balance not having the government be your sole funder, and then how do you kind of lose out when you are good at fundraising and you have a proven model that works. And that really is, in my opinion, the boat that Siva is in. They do their work well. They have an impressive fundraising plan. Their donations alone, I could run the nonprofit I run for about 20 years on just their tithe offerings alone. So those are the comments that I would conclude with. I want to really also implore this commission, as we talk about the Community Services Commission, our process is nearly done. We have a need to really address the mission and the purpose in the eyes of the current council. So I want to just take that opportunity, and I want to thank my fellow commissioners and thank council. And of course, thank staff.
Absolutely, thank you. And please go back to your commission and tell them that we appreciate their work. Okay, so I'd like to close this item and transition to our next item on the agenda, item number 7. So I wanted to thank our team and Dr. Cole Bloom, and soon to be Dr. I don't know soon to be Dr. Emily Huang. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't think we've ever applauded the Community Services Commission before, but I think they're worthy. I guess they're worthy of applause, I guess. I mean, I guess so. And then next I see Director Gonzalez sitting down, and that only means one thing, TEFRA. So I'd like to start with item number 7, Hayward Hangars Project TEFRA hearing, public TEFRA hearing as required by the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, and adoption of a resolution approving the issuance of industrial revenue bonds by the California Public Finance Authority in an amount not to exceed $5,253,000 to finance or refinance the construction improvement of the Hayward Executive Airport located at 20995 through 22049 Sky West Drive, Hayward, California. Madam Director Finance, go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I hope to be fairly brief on this item. This is a standard item that we routinely bring to Council for consideration. Just want to highlight for Council as well as the public why we're here this evening. Just for clarification, TEFRA does stand for Tax and Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act. And we are required as an agency who will act as a conduit to hold a public hearing for this requirement prior to the issuance of any bonds. And so TEFRA hearings are held to allow for private placement of placement bonds to use the city's tax exempt status on bonds as long as the projects serve a dual purpose of both public and private interests. And so just clarifying again that the issuance of any bonds are not the liability of the city in any way, shape, or form, and that issuance does not have an impact on the city's credit rating either. This just does allow the applicant to utilize the city's tax exempt status. And we do have the applicant online with us tonight from the Hayward Hangars LLC, Jim Alschul, if there are questions specific to the project. So again, I just kind of briefly went over what the city's role is. Again, city does not have a financial responsibility related to this TEFRA hearing, so I won't spend too much time going over that. High-level overview of the project being proposed, which is the Hayward Hangars project for the construction, furnishing, and equipment of 8 box hangar units at the airport, refinancing certain outstanding lines of credit loans and promissory notes of the current borrower, which is Hayward Hangars LLC, and then financing as needed for amounts required for reserves, capitalized interest, cost of issuance, and other financing expenses related to the issuance of bonds. So this evening, we are asking council to conduct a public hearing to consider the issuance of tax-exempt industrial revenue bonds by the California Public Finance Authority to assist with financing or refinancing of the Hayward Hangars project. And then the second is to adopt a resolution approving the issuance of these bonds by the authority to benefit the Hayward Hangars LLC to provide financing and refinancing in the aggregate principal in the amount not to exceed $5.2 million, of which the tax exempt portion will equate to about $3.4 million. With that, I will pause for any comments or questions. And as I said, we do have the applicant online.
Okay. Yeah, I see him online. Okay, first I'll come up here. Is there any questions? Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Just to be clear, so this is not money coming out of our general fund?
Correct.
And they're just using us for the tax, I mean, you've heard tax. And then the project itself, is this already a project that has been approved? Like, where is it in the airport?
So, my understanding, I believe this project came to council last April, and there was a change in the financial institute providing the financing, and so that is why it's being brought to you again.
Okay.
But this item was brought to you, I believe it was on April 11th of last year.
Yeah, the council had already previously approved a TEFRA hearing, but because of some minor changes to the project, that's why it's back.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Councilmember Syra.
Can we specify what those changes are? I do remember this being on the agenda last time. And is it possible to pull up a map of this property?
I don't have a specific map to it, but
Yeah, and I would just say that this is not an approval of the project itself. The project has already been approved, and this is simply the financing. So
Understood.
Yeah. And it's expansion of additional executive hangars at the Hayward Hangars facility at the airport. So, but that project has already been approved previously.
So that was the change, was the addition of more hangars?
No, the change was the financial institution
correct.
that was
And
doing the
I
financing.
think that the applicant could probably speak to more details to that, but I don't think that the project itself did not change.
No.
This is specifically related to funding.
Understood. Okay. So there wasn't a change in the number
No.
of, it was just
No.
around the financial institution?
Correct.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I will close this portion, open up for public comment. I do not see any public comment online, and I do not see any public comment in the room. So I'd like to close public comment, and then I'll entertain any other question or motion. Moved by Councilmember Zermeño.
I do have a question after the second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Goldstein. And does the motioner or seconder have any questions, comments? No? Councilmember Syra.
Thank you. I just want to understand, because we received an email about this, how many planes do we anticipate being parked inside of these hangars?
I don't know if Mr. Altschul can tell. I don't know that we know exactly how many planes are going to be parked inside the hangars, but Mr. Altschul, if you have a response to that question.
Sure. The new building will have 8 units. We have already signed leases on 7 of these units. Each tenant, so far as I know, will just have one plane in his or her unit, or the unit that he or she has rented. The units are large enough so that each one could accommodate 2 small planes. So since these leases are for a year, there's a possibility that in the future, we may have one or more tenants who will put two planes in a hangar unit. But at least initially, we're anticipating one plane per hangar unit.
Great, thank you. And when you say plane, are you talking about smaller planes or smaller, private jets? I'm just trying to understand what kind of planes we're talking about.
No, actually, let me correct myself. One tenant who has signed a lease owns two airplanes, and he's going to have both of them in the unit. One of those planes is currently being stored in a hangar that we have, which we've been providing group storage. And one of those planes is a small jet. The larger, we're going to have 4 units that are going to be 50 wide by 50 deep, and 4 that are maybe 50 wide by 40 deep. So we anticipate that most of the planes that will be stored in these units will be either piston engined or turboprops. There are certain small jet models that will fit within these units, but the units are too small to accommodate, say, a Gulfstream or a Falcon or something like that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So moved by Councilmember Zermeño, seconded by Councilmember Goldstein. Madam City Clerk, if you can take the roll. Oh no, we're voting off there. We can now vote. How's that?
All right, Mayor. We all ready? Yes? Okay, here we go.
Did we do public comment for this item?
Yes. Yes, okay.
I'm blaming purely user error on that one. And it unanimously passes 7-0. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Uchel, and I'm sure it's like 1 o'clock in the morning where you're at somewhere.
A little after midnight. Well, I want to express my tremendous appreciation to all of you, to the city of Hayward. And I particularly want to mention you, Mayor Salinas, your predecessor, Mayor Halliday, Councilmember Zermeño, whom I've had the privilege of knowing for a very long time, Kelly McAdoo, Alex Ameri, Doug McNeely, and his team at the airport for all the support you've given us. We've gone through a very long and arduous process to get the necessary approvals from the Federal Aviation Administration for this building. You've been behind us all the way. You've been extraordinarily supportive, both in the challenges we've had in dealing with the FAA, but also in so many other matters, large and small. And it's always been a pleasure to work with and to get to know you.
Thank you, appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item is the council reports and announcements. Are there any council reports and announcements? Councilmember Roach.
I don't actually have one this time, so thank you.
Oh, I thought you had your
No,
hand up. Oh, okay. I do. I wanted to give a big shout out to the Mount Eden High School Puente Project students. They've been volunteering this week at the Kids Breakfast Club at Burbank Elementary School. We've been cooking and serving breakfast to kids and families every morning at 8:30 a.m. and we've been having activities from 9 to 9:30. These extraordinary kids, they get up at 6 o'clock in the morning on their spring break, and they come on out to Burbank Elementary School to cook breakfast, to serve breakfast, and they always show up. They're always on time. They're always spirited. They're always a lot of fun, and they're just always really excited to do service. But mostly, the energy they bring in the room at 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning is just incredible. The kids love them. The families really appreciate the work that they're doing. And so I just really wanted to thank the Mount Eden Mountain High School Puente Project for coming out and just contributing a whole lot. Also wanted to give a big shout out to some of our police officers who have also come out to cook breakfast. And this morning, you know, I saw the police chief out there with his sleeves rolled up making tater tots. And so we made breakfast burritos this morning. And yesterday we had Captain Dan Olson there. And I believe I also saw our city manager also in charge of the tater tots. I just wanted to say thank you. And we'll be at Burbank Elementary School every morning this morning from 8:30 to 9:30. Breakfast is served. And tomorrow morning, be ready because we got French toast tomorrow morning. So with that said, I believe we have one more. Councilmember Andrews.
I did not have tater tots on my bingo card tonight for a meeting, but next time. Wanted to give an announcement regarding disposal days. I know Councilmember Zermanio posted this. I reposted. Disposal day is April 13th. This has been a great program for our community. We usually are oversubscribed for the day. So if you have to dispose of waste, there's some rules and regulations of what you can dispose of, but you can contact maintenance services. There probably is a wait list, but you can still register at disposal.days@hayward-ca.gov, or you can go online to the website, City of Hayward website, for more information. Also wanted to give an update on the good work that Keep Hayward Clean and Green is doing regarding seniors. There will be a front yard assistance program later this summer. There is a deadline for helping with your yard, Friday, May 24th. So if you would like to have front yard assistance, we do have a certain number of spots, but it would take place on August 17th. But the deadline to apply is May 24th. They're also looking for seniors for that day. And then Earth Day is April 20th at Weeks. So good job, Keep Hayward Clean and Green. Thanks.
Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Zermenio for the event that you hosted on Saturday for Cesar Chavez. That was a wonderful event, and it pulled together the community in front of City Hall, and appreciate your leadership in bringing us all together to celebrate such an important person. Thank you.
Councilmember Andrews again.
I also wanted to thank HARD for their Easter egg hunts. It was like Coachella out there. I never seen so many people out in my life at Kennedy Park. So good job with the Easter egg hunt.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to council referral. Item number 8, we have a council referral, public art from Councilmember Andrews and Councilmember Roach. Councilmember Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to staff for doing this analysis. This is something that has been very close to my heart, which is public art. Yes, that rhymed. Wanted to thank also Keep Hayward Clean and Green, who has been doing a lot of work in this space, and Hayward Arts Council for just keeping art alive in Hayward. So give a shout out to your mom, Councilmember Syra. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit more streamlined for our developers. This is something that a lot of the members on the dais here have heard from me on Planning Commission. Councilmember Bonilla and Roche, and Goldstein, pretty much have heard of me pleading with the developers to add public art. It helps with reducing blight. It actually is helpful in having a more attractive neighborhood. And it's just something that speaks to community pride. And if we could have developers help us out in a more consistent way, that would be extremely helpful for the city. The staff has been working really hard in looking at our residential developments to see how they can incorporate public art, but we should not have staff do a lot of that heavy lifting when the developers have that opportunity to do that as part of their project. So I understand that staff time is precious, but I would like to look at a policy of 1% to 2%. This is something that's very common in our surrounding cities to have as a percentage that goes towards public art, or they pay that percentage as part of their project and then the art is incorporated in their project, or it goes into a bucket of funds where we can actually pay towards public art throughout the community. So I understand staff analysis is stating that they are looking at summer and fall 2024 to work with one of our members of staff with a management fellow. 2024, there will be a work session in November 2024, and then early 2025, we would have feedback and hopefully implementation, and I'm fine with that timeline. So just hoping that members of council would also be okay in moving that direction. Thank you. And thank you to Councilmember Roche for signing on this referral, and also to the mayor, who's always been supportive of public art whenever it comes up. So thanks.
Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Yeah, I am more than happy to support Councilmember Andrews' long-running advocacy for public art. Even when she left the Planning Commission, somebody would often speak up and say, well, if Councilmember Andrews were here, she would say, yeah, or Councilmember Goldstein, then Planning Commission, would do that. So I'm more than happy to support this referral. Because just a little bit of research I did after seeing Angela's analysis as well was that cities who've adopted public art ordinances find that it does foster economic development, it enhances public spaces, and it helps to create just a more desirable community. And I think adding the 1% to 2%, which many cities are doing, including Palo, or you know what, I think Berkeley, Alameda, plenty of cities are doing this. It's telling a developer that we have pride in our city and that we would like you to develop here and fit into our city and you know, be part of the community and the way we see ourselves. And it adds sort of, you know, just it's a sophistication to be able to say, like, this is something we value and we'd like you to be part of those values here in Hayward. So I'm more than happy to support it. I'm fine with the staff analysis because Councilmember Andrews is fine with it. So I would hope and encourage my, my colleagues to support this referral. Thank you.
Okay. Who doesn't love public art, Madam City Manager? It looks like you're going to say something.
No, I think the staff analysis speaks for itself. I appreciate the council being respectful of our proposed timeline, just given everything else that's on the plate for staff this spring and summer. So that's my only comment, and I would echo the support for public art as an incredibly valuable tool for a lot of different things in a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And out of all seriousness, there is something about public art, and I have been to big cities. I've been to small little towns, and something that I've always appreciated, that even in the smallest of towns that I've been through, even in some of the most desolate places like in New Mexico and Arizona, they've had a wall or they've had something painted and they've had, or a statue put up. And as somebody driving through town, I've stopped and I've done a selfie with it, and I've done a selfie. And if I'm stopped and took a picture, you know what? I'm going to stop and get something to drink, and I'm going to stop and grab something to eat at the store or something. So it does generate a buzz. It does generate activity, and it also brings community together, especially if it's done right and you know, and it's successful. So thank you very much for bringing this. And I believe. Oh, Councilmember Sarmiento.
Even a wall full of chewing gum attracts tourism. So.
Yeah. 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 I'm going to stop here so that we can no. So I guess, so what do we do now? We just.
So I think if there's.
Oh, Councilmember Syrup.
Oh. Okay.
Moved by, or.
So I'll move the item.
I'll second the item.
Moved by Councilmember Andrews, seconded by Councilmember Roach and Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmembers Andrews and Roach, for putting this forward. I will not be dishonoring my mom's legacy tonight by voting against this. But I do have some thoughts on how we're approaching public art that I hope, as staff takes this into consideration and prepares this for a work session, we'll also consider. My hope is, with this fee, you know, we don't want to discourage development, obviously. Is this something we approach like an in lieu of fee, where similarly when people don't pay for you know, inclusionary units, they help us fund our affordable housing? If they're not interested in doing public art on their own property, they would be paying into a fund. Is that the idea here, just to clarify?
I think that's the research that still needs to happen. I think one method is simply to just charge a flat fee on building permits for all building permits that then goes into a fund. And then there could also be another way is a policy on larger development projects where you require a certain percentage. So I think that's this analysis that staff will be undertaking.
Okay, and then the main thrust here I want to advocate for is having this fee go towards permanent public art or neighborhood service staffing. It's one thing to have art here or art there, but it's another to have a person that is coordinating artists, creating opportunities for artists to showcase and sell their work, connecting with local businesses to blanket the city with murals, creating partnerships with our schools and colleges so students are connected to these artistic opportunities. Really, not just the art for the sake of art, but the culture we're building around art and the creation of art and the opportunities around art. So as staff is considering this referral and what to do with these fees, I think finding a way to channel that into more permanent public art and culture staffing is to me the best way to execute on these funds to achieve the effect I think we all want up here. But yeah, happy to support this. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Andrews, seconded by Councilmember Roach. If there are no other questions, oh, you know what? I just turned off my computer. Can we do a roll call vote, Madam City Clerk? Because I just turned off my computer.
Yes, Mayor. And just for the record, there's no public comment.
And there's no public comment online, and there's no public comment in the chamber.
Okay.
Madam City Clerk, you can take a roll call.
Okay, good. Councilmember Andrews.
Yes, thank you to all my colleagues for supporting.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray Bonilla Jr.
Yes, and thank you to Councilmember Andrews and Roche for your leadership on this important initiative.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldstein.
Yes, thank you, Council Members Andrews and Roach. Thank you.
Councilmember Roach.
Yes, and thank you, Councilmember Andrews, for letting me get kudos on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Syrup.
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño. Mayor Salinas.
Yes, and it unanimously passes. Next meeting will be April 16th. Meeting's adjourned.